Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's bitch ass dudes pining for love when I put Woody Allen's Manhattan against Stephen Frears' High Fidelity. And this one was an interesting one to get through because I mean both of these movies are very like relevant, relatable. I guess would be the more apt term, and also you can all the atmospheres are perfectly captured. So let's just dive right on in to the nitty and the picky. First up, we have Woody Allen's Manhattan, which is quite possibly Woody Allen's most mature work. In the 70s, it was more pure Woody Allen. This was kind of before he started like ripping off Bergman and Fellini and really diving deep into his fucking Dostoevsky obsession and stuff. This was still like, what this man was all about. As of course his true masterpiece Annie Hall, which is in a previous episode where I put Annie Hall against Deconstructing Harry. Feel free to check that one out as well. But this one, not necessarily a follow up, because he did a film in between Annie Hall and Manhattan called Interiors, and that's a further down the line episode when I put Interiors against Hanging Up. But Manhattan was his first movie that he shot in black and white. Brilliant black and white cinematography by the great Gordon Willis, and the film is just beautifully shot. This you see all the great like New York locations and stuff. And the thing about Woody Allen, he's definitely one of those filmmakers from New York that is clearly in love with that city. There's no doubt in your mind that he loves that city. Even like opens up with that him trying to write that novel. It opens up about his love affair with New York City, and the film also like very telling of like who Woody Allen was. They didn't really know it at the time. Of course, we see him dating a 17-year-old chick played by Muriel Hemingway, who, of course, was the daughter of the writer Ernest Hemingway. And, of course, his friend, played by the brilliant Michael Murphy, who was one of the great Robert Altman players and stuff, in a way, kind of plays the similar, like, friend that, like, Tony Roberts played in Annie Hall. But here, I guess they needed more of a serious actor to really play that part. And of course, like he's cheating on his wife, who is crazy. Dude's got an exceptional wife, but he's cheating on her with this chick played by Diane Keaton, who of course, Woody Allen ends up falling for at halfway through the movie. And of course, Diane Keaton was probably Woody Allen's greatest muse. I mean, he did some of his best work with Diane Keaton, starting with Sleeper and then like Love and Death. And then of course Annie Hall being the biggest example of it. And then of course they did Interiors together as well. But Manhattan kind of was like the cap on, maybe the apex, whatever the fuck you want to call it, because their scenes together are just absolutely brilliant. When they try to go for that walk and they get caught in an electrical storm, so they take shelter in a planetarium. It's a really like that's part of where they fall in love essentially, even though he's still dating this 17-year-old. But what the biggest irony of this film is that the 17-year-old is the most mature one in the film, because of course, once he starts striking up a relationship with Diane Keaton's character, who is, of course, been shunned by Michael Murphy's character, who, he doesn't really want to leave his wife and all this shit. So, they kind of break it off and everything. So then now she's with Woody Allen, and then one of the most awkward scenes in that film is when they end up going on a double date with Michael Murphy and his wife in the film, and that is one of the most uncomfortable scenes of the film, and then it's also like kind of where they end up falling back in love, and then they get back together, and then now Woody ain't got shit, and then now he also that the end of the film is just absolutely brilliant. He goes and like because earlier in the film he had told Muriel Hemingway's character, you want to like, go off to London and study, you got your whole life ahead of you. Don't bog yourself down with somebody like me. But then he like chases her down and she ends up, giving like the most mature thought in the film. It's like, you told me to do this, what's 6 months if our relationship can't last for 6 months, then what is it anyways, and he realizes, how dumb he's been the whole movie. That ending scene, this woman that's way younger than him, but is far more wiser and in tune, in a way like his generation, kind of was disillusioned by the fact that, everything they grew up to believe was bullshit. And then, that her generation was where they knew it was bullshit, so they just didn't give a fuck type thing. They're just gonna feel and do whatever the hell they want to, and everything. And of course, there's also side one of the Woody Allen's character's ex-wife, played by Meryl Streep, who left him for another woman. She's writing a book about it, and then when that book comes out, it's very revealing about shit. It's just a really beautiful film, very well done, and a very mature look at idiotic people. And we move forward to Stephen Frears' High Fidelity, starring John Cusack. And the thing about High Fidelity is, like, there's an unofficial trilogy that John Cusack was in, and it's sort of the coming of age of John Cusack, because he plays very similar characters in all these films. It started out with Better Off Dead, and then you got Say Anything, and then it all culminated with High Fidelity. Now, the difference between High Fidelity and those previous two films is that his characters in Better Off Dead and Say Anything, you can almost like really feel for. You like these characters. They're genuinely nice people. You see him in High Fidelity, dude's a fucking idiot, and he's a whiny ass bitch, because the film opens up, his girlfriend Laura is leaving him, and he's clearly upset with it, but he's acting like he's not. He's being a real cock smooch, and he's just like, you really wanted to fuck me up. You should have got to me earlier and shit, because you can clearly, like Stevie Wonder could see that this motherfucker is affected by this shit, but of course he's got a hard on for like doing the whole top five this of all time. So it's like all through the movie, he's doing these fucking top fives, and it starts out with the top five biggest breakups of all time. And then like through the film, he goes through the top five breakups, and then he like says, "Oh, I'm gonna go, see what happened." And he realized he was just a fucking idiot, because the first one was a fucking illusion. The second one, he broke up with that bitch. The third one, he was just smitten because he never had pussy that good. Because fucking Catherine Zeta-Jones. I mean, who wouldn't be enamored with that lovely goddess? And then the fourth one, she was just as fucked up as him, but they kind of took advantage of each other, and because they didn't want to be alone. It's very telling of like how sad and empty that generation was, because yet again they grew up in a world where there wasn't anything to believe in, and nothing came along to help them believe in anything. And so he also owns a record store, which his two employees, they really nail like those record heads and how like fucking just insufferable they are. Because Jack Black is one of them, and he's like one of those loud, opinionated motherfuckers that like if he doesn't like what you like, or you don't have his like kind of philosophy, he just gets fucking just all in your shit, which I find kind of ironic for somebody that's such a fucking music snob, wearing a fucking Yanni shirt. What the fuck is up with that? You've been fucking slamming people's musical taste the whole goddamn movie, and you're wearing a Yanni shirt? Is that supposed to be fucking ironic? I don't know. Jack Black can get very fucking annoying at times, but it is what it is. But one thing about it though, the motherfucker can sing. I'll give him that, because as much the John Cusack at the end of the movie, he doesn't want dude to play his band, and then ends up fucking crushing the "Let's Get It On" by Marvin Gaye. So everybody's got that one thing, and of course the other dude is like the complete opposite of Jack Black's character. He's very reserved, and but he clearly somebody that he's gonna go out of his way to find some fucking Japanese import of a fucking record that never got released in America and shit. These motherfuckers are real, and like they're very opinionated, very knowledgeable, insufferable, annoying. There's so many adjectives you can attach to these motherfuckers, and they do nail that atmosphere perfectly. But most of the movie revolves around John Cusack trying to get back with this Laura chick who is now taken up with some fucking dude named Ian, whatever the fuck his name is, played by Tim Robbins, who, was always exceptional at playing a smarmy cunt when he had to, and he definitely does that. But the thing about this film that irks me personally is that it isn't very mature. Yeah, dude learns shit in the end. He learns how dumb he was, learns how up his own ass he was. But where this film fails and where Manhattan succeeds is like Manhattan, it doesn't work out for Woody Allen's character. You know, it might, it's left very up in the air, but it's probably not to because, in all honesty, motherfuckers never get over their fucking bullshit, you know? And in High Fidelity, it's all purely circumstantial. Like, had that chick's father not died, they probably wouldn't have reconnected the way that they fucking did, you know? And yeah, that Ian dude probably got, you know, it probably would have went down the line, but I really don't think she would have went back to him that easy, you know? And I don't really think like he would have like learned shit that you know, I just it's just so it's such a fucking circle jerk fantasy for fucking Gen X or whatever the fuck generation that John Cusack falls into, and the fucking audience that like jizzed over this movie when it fucking came out. It's almost as irksome as Gross Point Blank, you know. So I got to give this round to Manhattan because one, it's just a real ass movie and it's so beautifully shot. Like it's such a fucking like the understated black and white cinematography on a story that's not entirely black and white. You know, it's one giant moral gray area. And it's just simply beautiful. Whereas, like, you know, High Fidelity just seemed fucking basic as fuck. You know, my curiosity is how the fuck was Jack Black never in a fucking Kevin Smith movie? He feels like a fucking refugee from a Kevin Smith movie. And honestly, this feels like, you know, if Kevin Smith was a pretentious fucking douchebag, you know, that's what High Fidelity feels like to me. And you know, it's just so it wraps it up so perfectly on bow, you know, just makes your fucking cock cry, you know. And so Manhattan, though, that brings a real tear to your eye because it's like that moment of realization that Woody Allen has at the end of that fucking film is just is simply brilliant because like he realizes like, yeah, I'm a fucking moron. I deserve to wait. You know, I don't deserve shit to just be handed to me. And I feel like John Cusack's character, he got the shit just fucking handed to him. And it's fucking lame as fuck, you know? Yeah, this movie intrigued me when I was in fucking high school, but as a grown ass man, I realized how fucking dumb it is, you know? And it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna bang this singer played by the lovely Lisa Bonet, and then get hung up when my ex girlfriend is banging this other dude. You know, so it's just fucking just shut the fuck up. So, anyways, I digress. This round goes to Woody Allen's Manhattan. So, for anybody keeping score, that is now 92 to 72. 70s are up by 20 again because you know what? The 70s were just fucking real. You know, yeah, they made some trash, but they weren't always on that bullshit like the 90s were. The 90s, everybody wanted to feel good, especially by the end of the decade, at the turn of the fucking century. You know, this movie technically came out in the year 2000, the High Fidelity did. And it's like people want to justify the emptiness of their lives. You know, it's all going to work out in the end. It ain't shit going to fucking work out. You got to really work for that shit, you know. And if anything, you know, Woody Allen knew how to work for it. And plus, a lot fucking funnier, a lot better written. You know, he co-wrote that Manhattan with Marshall Brickman, who was the only, you know, his best writing partner that he ever had. Y'all think he also co-wrote Annie Hall. Simply brilliant. So if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. It's just one asshole's opinion on a very long, self-indulgent journey to figure out which decade was better for movies, the 70s or the 90s. And it's looking like I'm right. The motherfucking 70s. They're up by 20. That lead continues to grow. It's back and forth right now. Maybe the 90s can eat that lead, but only time will tell. So until then, listen to the motherfucking music.